Now, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions has called for a significant rise in the minimum wage, and a group of private sector unions, Connect, the CWU, the FSU, SIPTU and Unite, have come out to support that call. We can speak to Gareth Murphy, who is Head of Industrial Relations and Campaigns with the FSU. That's the Financial Services Union. Good morning to you, Gareth, and thank you indeed for joining us on the programme. I think my first question to you has to be about your members. I'm very surprised to think that people working in the financial services could be on minimum wage, are they?
So we actually represent, morning, Michael, first of all, and thanks for having me. We actually represent workers across a range of sectors: banking sector, the financial services more generally, tech sector, and also more recently the video game sector as well. We have a group of workers in Game Workers Unite who are members of Financial Services Union, and actually directly within our own sphere, the minimum wage and living wage is most relevant to our games members, because where we collectively bargain as a union with the banks and a number of tech companies, we've collectively bargained entry rates of pay that are above the living wage. But this is much more a societal issue generally than just our sector. And that's why we're working with 4 or 5 other trade unions and the Irish Congress of Unions, because overall we know approximately 20% of Irish workers are considered to be low wage, and the living wage would effectively, or making the living wage mandatory or statutory would effectively eradicate low wages. So it's a really positive thing, and it's something that would benefit society as a whole. So it's not just our direct members, although it is some of them.
No, fair enough. I take it it's still a good job to get a job in the bank, and you wouldn't expect to be on minimum wage. But should people expect to be on minimum wage if they're in the gaming industry? I mean, they really have popular products and they don't come cheap.
No, I mean, there's no reason why the game sector shouldn't have the living wage as a floor. It is one of the most profitable sectors globally. It's actually passed, in terms of revenues and incomes, the film industry and the music industry. Video games now is overwhelmingly the biggest entertainment sector, and highly profitable. And there's absolutely no reason why those employers in Ireland shouldn't be paying the living wage to all of the workers. There's quite an uneven wage distribution within video games. So some of the coders and developers, as you'd expect, are on good wages, and fair play to them. They do great work. But then some of the what are called QA testers, so quality assurance testers, so the people who play the games to make sure, all the doors open and all the tricks work, and they iron out all the bugs, they are often paid minimum wage or certainly below living wage, but they perform a vital function that anyone who's a gamer knows. The frustration if something doesn't quite work, if there's a glitch. So these guys iron out all those glitches. And
it's a skill.
It's an absolute skill,
I'm sure there's people who think they're great gamers but wouldn't be able to do that job. And obviously skills should have a value. Is the cost of these, and I know it's kind of gone off track a little bit, but it does come down to the wages. You said they're very, very profitable companies. Is the cost of the games a little bit like CDs used to be? They used to say there's nothing can be done. They can't be sold for any less than €20. Lo and behold, competition comes on board, Spotify and some of these other platforms, and CDs now are sold for next to nothing.
The challenge really is the distribution of the money that's generated through the sales of games. And there's a real uneven distribution. And this isn't just seen in games, because we're actually seeing profits recover quite well across the economy generally. And we're seeing sort of record levels, billions being recorded by different companies across the economy as a whole. And in games, globally, there's 5 or 6 publishing companies that would be well known by any gamers out there, and they hoard essentially a lot of the profits, and they aren't fairly distributed amongst those who actually generate the profits through their work. So the challenge really is about a distribution. It's not about affordability. It's about where that money at the end of the day goes. Consumers are paying high prices for games, but most of that money then is taken by 5 or 6 companies globally, and it isn't fairly distributed amongst the workers and amongst the subcontracting workers, because it's an industry that might have 5 or 6 top name companies, but then lots of different companies are involved in the production chain globally down the line, and ultimately you end up with some workers on very, very low wages.
And that brings us to everything else that we've been talking about for the last few months. For a few minutes ago, we were talking about the interest rates increases. Yesterday, we're continuously worrying about the cost of our bills, not just mortgage bills, but all of the utility bills. The grocery shopping has gone up and so on. And I take it at this stage, people on the minimum wage are struggling to get by day to day.
Yeah, we're in a very serious crisis, like a really serious crisis. It's hard to almost imagine. Ireland is such a rich country. We've got huge wealth within the economy and within the island, and then we've got huge wealth also going through the island, going through the economy. And yes, in conjunction with that, we've got 20% considered low pay, and the cost of living crisis is to such a degree now that families are having to make some shocking decisions about what they actually choose, what they can afford to pay this winter. Is it electricity? Is it energy? Is it food? This isn't an over-exaggeration. This is a very real experience that people are beginning to have to make difficult decisions. And that's kind of frightening in this day and age, in, like I said, a country that is rich, is wealthy, and can afford to be decent and fair for everyone. And we know we have a low wage problem, but I suppose the good news is we actually know there's a solution. It's not like we don't understand how to address this. The living wage is internationally recognised and accepted as a policy mechanism that can eradicate low wages.
Okay.
So we have a solution. And actually this government has committed to do it in the term of the government. And I suppose what we're saying is we have never faced this sort of urgency right now, and now would be the time to do it.
Okay, well, I think there's a lot of questions about how the government is defining the living wage as opposed to how the Vincentarian Partnership defines it, and indeed the time frame and how living standards will have changed and the cost of living will have increased by the time it's introduced. But what about the argument about chasing inflation? If you take your gamers, for example, the people who are checking the games on the minimum wage at the moment, if you bring them up to €14 an hour, let's say, what about the coders and the other guys who are on good money at the moment? Will they not all want an increase?
Well, I think all workers do deserve an increase and do deserve a decent increase, kind of regardless of whether you're lower or middle income.
Okay, but then do we have to pay more do we have to pay more then for the games, and then do we have less money in our pockets and go back looking for another pay increase and so on?
So I think this argument about inflation, it maybe misses the cause of inflation currently. So the crisis that we're in, the high inflation is not being driven by wages. It's being driven by supply side factors, such as the shortage of supply in energy, such as disruptions to supply in supply chains. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has had a massive impact. It's most directly a tragedy for those.
I know, but if you deliver
had a massive impact.
Sure, but at the same time, Gareth, if you deliver massive pay increases, and just to use the gaming sector as an example, the people who are making these huge profits are going to be asked to reduce their profits because they have to pay out more in wages or increase the cost of the product to the consumer. And there's where you end up chasing inflation, is it not?
So that's only if they decide to maintain or seek further profits. So the challenge there, Michael, is not that wages have gone up. It's that the response of those companies has been, instead of to accept slightly less profits and a fairer distribution of wealth, they've decided to pass on that wage increase to consumers through
I know.
So
I know, and I guess that's what we're both saying. And what do you think will be the outcome, I suppose, is the question.
and that does come back to that kind of bigger question of, are we happy with how wealth is distributed, or do we actually need society, governments, the media, trade unions, etc., to begin to say to corporations, look, when is enough enough? Is 500 million, is 2 billion, is 6 billion? At some point wealth has to be redistributed down, or we are going to face just societal breakdown and cleavages. It's so extreme. Yeah. So I think corporations have to say, well, you know what? At some point, we're just going to have to redistribute wealth downwards. We have enough. We're rich enough.
Yeah, well, whether that transpires or not, only time will tell. What we do know at the moment is that people really are feeling the pinch, and that's why you're calling for an increase, a significant increase in the rate of the minimum wage. Gareth, we'll leave it there for the moment. Many thanks for talking to us. Much appreciated. Gareth Murphy is Head of Industrial Relations and Campaigns with the Financial Services Union.
Michael at lmfm.ie.
The Michael Reade Show with EirGrid, managing and developing the national electricity grid so that it's fit for our current needs and ready for our future ones.